Good day. My name is Mashudu Raudzingana, and my colleague Shanali, Govender, and I are going to be talking about modeling experiential learning in a virtual design studio, focusing on staff development for teaching and learning. We are joining you from the University of Cape Town, South Africa, based at the Center for Innovation in Learning and Teaching. In today's presentation, we're going to start off by talking about what Design Studio is. Then we are going to talk about Amathuba, which is the Brightspace learning management system for UCT. And then we'll talk about the Design Studio on the Amathuba platform. We are then going to talk about the learning design process that was followed as we were designing this course. We will then talk about how, some of the activities that we did on the Amathuba or the Brightspace learning management system as we were creating the course, and some of the activities that we did with our participants. Design Studio is a 6-week online course that takes approximately about 20 hours of work of the participants. This was created to support the staff at the University of Cape Town with the redesign and design process of their courses for blended and online context. In this course, participants produce a well-structured high-level course map on an Excel spreadsheet. They then translate or transfer their plan into an actual course site. The design of the Design Studio course was created by the use of the ABC design method by the University of College London. That is the process that focuses more on what students will do and less on the facilitators and the teacher. Now, in previous cohort, we followed the process that is shown on the flow chart below, where we would, as part of our build or building the Design Studios course, we would upload resources to manage files. This was on Amathuba, on Brightspace, as well as on Vula. Then we would create HTML pages or lesson pages using custom-made templates. We then added external resources or linked any external resources that we were going to use into those lesson pages or into the content tool. We would add participants once the site was ready using their email addresses or their students or staff accounts. Then when we were done, we would then release or publicize the course for them to access. Modules were released on a weekly basis. We followed a different process in this year's cohort, which was ran at the beginning of the year this year, 2023. We ran our second cohort this year on the Brightspace or the Amathuba platform. It was built from scratch. This Design Studio course was built from scratch that you see on the right-hand side, on the snippet on the right-hand side. It was not a triggered course migration from the Vula LMS. The build process followed an emergent course design. I am going to hand over to Shanali Govender, who is going to tell you more about the emergent course design process that we followed, as well as some of the activities that we used to create the experiential learning of the Design Studio course. Thank you. Over to you, Shanali.
Greetings, colleagues. My name is Shanali Govender, and I've had the privilege of working with my colleague Mashudu Raudzingana on Design Studio. I'm here to start talking a little bit about the principles of teaching and learning and academic staff development that exist behind the Design Studio process. In the first instance, we were very committed to Design Studio being a primarily experiential process for our students or our participants. We wanted them to understand and to be able to experience firsthand what it would be like to be a student on Amathuba. So although all of the participants in Design Studio are staff members, they are logged onto the Amathuba Design Studio site as students. What that means is that they get to experience all of the Amathuba functions as the student would experience it. The second key principle that we focus on is the idea that Design Studio is an opportunity for us to develop relationships with staff who take Design Studio, for staff who take Design Studio to develop relationships with each other, and to develop relationships with the wider SILT team through directing people to additional workshops or webinars, to the help desk, and to consultations. So although Design Studio takes staff through a design thinking, learning design type process, we're also fundamentally interested in building the kinds of networks and connections that allow staff not only to engage with us during Design Studio, but to be willing to come back to us with questions, queries, comments, ideas, experiences in months and even in some cases years after Design Studio. In Design Studio, we sought to model practice that was appropriate to the UCT context. So in Amathuba, this has meant a slight shift than the way that it was done previously in Vula. When Design Studio started in Vula, we were in the middle of the pandemic. South Africa was in quite hard lockdowns, and our students were all learning remotely. And so the version of Design Studio that existed in Vula focused very much on asynchronous, relatively low technology tools and design choices in order to make learning maximally accessible, not only to the staff on Design Studio, but to the students that they would be teaching. Since Design Studio has moved on to Amathuba, however, we are back to a primarily face-to-face context with our learning management system being used for additional learning, and thus for many staff, rather than having a fully developed course site at the beginning of term, course sites become more emergent rather than pre-prepared. And so that was a principle that we adopted quite strongly behind the use of Design Studio this semester. Before I go any further, I'd like to talk a little bit about the context in which the University of Cape Town is located, so that the three design choices that we made that we want to talk to you about today make a little bit more sense. So the University of Cape Town is primarily a face-to-face institution, particularly at undergraduate level. Undergraduates do have exposure to various kinds of technologies, but those are largely mediated by face-to-face lectures and tutorials, and students will, to a large extent, use the learning management system and other tools in the UCT educational technologies ecology to support learning that happens in face-to-face spaces. Given our context historically, there is a very strong focus on responsive teaching. Many of our staff value and strive towards editing their courses, refining their courses in response to the needs of the students that they find in front of them year on year. So in one year, a lecturer may use a particular reading. Based on their engagements with their students in the following year, they might use something entirely different. So course structures aim to be responsive. We also work in a fairly resource-constrained environment, despite what the picture may suggest. And so while UCT may be one of South Africa's wealthier and more historically advantaged institutions, our staff are still required to teach and produce undergraduates who are well skilled and suited to the local economy without having a great deal of additional resourcing. What this means is that most staff don't have access to a learning designer. They don't have access to a graphics specialist. Neither do they have access to people who maintain their Amathuba sites, Brightspace sites, full-time for them. They may get a little bit of support from their department in those regards, but it's not a full-time, permanently available resource. Additionally, the UCT context is linguistically diverse, with many of our staff and students coming from backgrounds where English is not their mother tongue. And finally, we are currently in a 3-year migration process. Last year was the first year of our migration with a pilot. This year, our first-year courses are migrating, And next year, we'll see a substantial number of second and third year courses migrating. And staff are either building their courses themselves, working with migrated course sites, and in some cases are supported by learning designers if they are migrating in phase. What I'm going to do next, colleagues, is I'm going to talk about 3 major insights or learnings that we had as a result of working with Design Studio on Amathuba. The first is around this model of building on the go. So what we did this year with Amathuba is we built our unit level structures, so weeks 1, 2, 3, and so on. We built inside of that a folder level structure that allowed us to create, for example, the live sessions folder or the asynchronous learning folder, a pre-session folder, and so on. But what we did not do is we did not populate these prior to the course starting. We had a pre-session page that we tried to make sure was available to our participants at the beginning of each week. Pre-session referring to before the live session. And then we built both the contents of the live session and the asynchronous learning unit based on what it is that our participants indicated was interesting to them, was a challenge for them, and so on. What this meant was that we engaged in a kind of responsive emergent site design. This was quite stressful and required us to have additional time available during the running of the course to be able to build in this particular way. The course was strongly focused on live sessions, with resources and activities being added to the asynchronous tab after each session. Another aspect of the course design that we took quite seriously was the idea of opening out the Amathuba or Brightspace space. And in order to do this, we have incorporated a number of additional tools into the Amathuba space. In Design Studio itself, we incorporated, for example, Padlet, but also links to resources and activities on other websites, Microsoft Teams, and Google Drive. On the right-hand side, you will see the tool wheel that we share with staff at UCT. What this indicates is in relation to the 6 learning types that are outlined in the ABC method, this indicates the key tools on Amathuba that are most likely to be utilized in relation to those types, and then additional institutional tools that are also used in relation to those types. In the outermost circle, you can see tools such as Gradescope and WooClap and Padlet and Hypothesis, which are third-party tools which are used and integrated into the Amathuba site for students, but which may change every few years depending on availability and demand. One of the strategies that we used this year that we have not used previously is the idea of a Design Studio Sandbox. My colleague Mashudu suggested this, and it has proved, I think, one of the most successful parts of the Design Studio this year. So what we did was that in addition to the Design Studio course site, we created a sandbox. While in the course site, all our participants are added to the site as students in student role, in the Design Studio Sandbox, they are added to the sandbox as staff. And what that allows them to do is it gives them a private place to play around. On the screen in front of you, you will see that what some participants will do is that they have added units, they have added folders, they have played around with HTML pages and learned how to add those. They've added pictures and so on. Related to the sandbox, colleagues also did things like explore how the grades tool worked, add elements to the calendar, and learn to send announcements. We have enjoyed sharing with you our experiences of what it is like to create and design a staff-facing development opportunity within a student LMS, and we hope that some of the ideas that we've shared with you will be helpful to you as well. Thanks so much and have a lovely day.